Our San Francisco Watersheds 101 webinar. I'm a volunteer elected board member with the Sierra Club Executive Committee here in San Francisco, and I'm helping to run the Green SF Now grassroots campaign. I'll be your moderator today, and I first wanted to thank you, viewers, for taking the time to join us. This is one of a series of virtual and real-life events that we're putting on to promote green infrastructure in San Francisco. And before I introduce our guests, I wanted to provide just a quick 1-minute overview on why we're running this campaign and how this all connects to our day-to-day lives here in San Francisco. So let's go ahead and get started about the campaign itself. Our goal with Green SF Now is to have more green and less gray in San Francisco, and more specifically, we're aiming for 60 acres of permeable green surfaces here in the city. What do we mean when we say green infrastructure? There's two types that we focus on. Deep green infrastructure is really what we want, which is the removal of asphalt, hardscape, or other non-permeable surfaces so that the rainwater and stormwater can actually percolate into the ground. And our guests today will talk much more about why that has benefits for everyone. And then we also are proponents of light green infrastructure. That's not true green infrastructure, but it offers so many amenities and is a good stepping stone to the true infrastructure we're looking to promote here in San Francisco. So we like to have that in our minds as well. So why do we do this? Today, we're going to focus on two of the whys around clean water and aquifer resilience. But there's many more reasons for green infrastructure, such as biodiversity, well-being, and safe streets. But again, on today's webinar, we're going to focus on those top two objectives. We've been doing all sorts of events and outreach across San Francisco. Sunset Dunes opening, like these pictures with 3 different generations of volunteers, events at schools, local communities to help everyone of all ages and backgrounds understand where does our water come from, what was there before we were, and how can we do a better job of stewarding those natural resources. In fact, this is a wonderful example of an event that one of our guests today helped put on here in the San Francisco Mission District. And with that, I think it's a great transition to introduce our speakers. Karen Curtis is the founder of Red Dot Studio and Red Dot Ranch. Thank you, Karen, for joining us today. And can you share a little bit about where you're calling in from and kind of a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. So I am an architect practicing here in San Francisco with Red Dot Studio, and we engage in research and design to create shelter for people and communities. And I'm also a farmer. And I have land in Pescadero that we steward, and it's really an experimental space where we understand that the way that we gather, live, and eat is part of nature, and that and we try to embed there and look at that. And Karen, you put on the webinar that I was an expert on water, and I'm going to actually reframe it and say more of a student of water. I'm really interested in it as a really basic for how, like, water as the first architect creating mountains and valleys and gorges, and water as something that links time together. And communities have always gathered around water. So as a student of it, that's actually how I got to meet Doug and DJ. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to DJ.
Doug Jacuzzi, Executive Director of Westside Water Resources. Tell us a bit about yourself. And unmute.
That would be important.
Yeah.
Thank you both. It's great to see you again. Doug Jacuzzi, or DJ, as they've introduced me. And Karen, yes, that was a great introduction. It's our mutual interest in design and in water that brought us together. And we carry it forward here into the future with more design and more thoughtful design around water. I'm in the outer sunset of San Francisco right now. It's foggy looking outside my window. And I also trained in architecture and have been building and designing for the last 45 years and segueing into focusing just on my interest in water.
Wonderful. And a couple notes for our viewers. We will have plenty of time for Q&A afterwards. And for now, we're going to hand it over to our guests to get started with our show. And I'll have to rewind here. I'm on the last slide. Let's try this again.
Well, it's okay. It's
There
the
we
last
go.
slide in the first.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to start it off, we're going to do a little survey. I know that a lot of you right now are muted or not able. So use the icon, the emoji icons at the bottom, or raise to answer these questions. And it's really, we're going to start with, where do you think San Francisco's drinking water comes from? So if you think it comes from Hetch Hetchy, raise your hands or use the emojis.
So on the bottom of your screen,
we
you
go.
can
We'll
press
see
the
some thumbs
happy sign. Yep, the little emoji face.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, there we go.
There we go.
Blowing up for Hetch Hetchy. Okay, the Sierra snowpack. Does our drinking water come from the Sierra snowpack? Still blowing up. All right, the Tuolumne River. Yeah, good, good. An aquifer in San Francisco. All right, not blowing up quite as much. Questions, good. Aquifers in the East Bay. Wow, nobody. I didn't know that either till DJ told me. So the correct answer is, just for reference, all of the above.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So, and Karen, next one. I think we're ready for the next slide. Sorry. I like to say that all water is one. I can tell you a personal story. My dad lives on the East Coast. He came to visit. He was flying in, and he had touched the Atlantic Ocean in the morning, and he arrived, and he wanted to, like, I had to run him directly out to the beach before the day ended because he wanted to touch the Pacific. So he had touched both sides on the same day. And when I think about that, I know that right now, all the water that exists on the planet is all the water that has always existed on this planet. A very, like, statistically insignificant amount has ever left the planet. So we are literally drinking what the dinosaurs drank. And I think about it now with my dad. When I touch water, I'm literally touching the water now that he's no longer with us, that he touched, right? So we have this history in our link with water. So 71% of the Earth's surface is water, but now only 1% is drinkable. And so when we think about how that is so, it's really sort of like a feat of design and engineering that we have taken water from one bioregion. We ship water bottles all over the world. Like, I have drank Fiji water, apparently. We ship it all over the world, or we take it from one bioregion. We often flush it down our toilets, and then we put it back in the ocean. So when we think about floods, droughts, water scarcity, famine, one of our jobs is to help water get back home, back where it belongs. And DJ, it would be great if you could talk a little bit about the hydrological cycle.
Oh, sure. I'll chime in.
Yeah.
Anytime here with comments on the wonderful slides you've chosen here, Karen, to get us going. The previous slide is just a heartfelt image for me. There are plenty of surf spots right around outside the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's a swell. This picture is all about a swell of water with the Golden Gate. It places water and our location, the two primary focuses of this image. And that's an image that sits in my mind because I've surfed that area all my entire life. The next image you chose, Karen, I absolutely love too, and I love your little story. I'll anecdotally, tell a little story about our blue planet that we see in the background there. When I was in community college, and I think it was Geography 101, our professor told us that if we took a basketball and we were to wrap it with a balloon, that would be about the depth of the ocean. And then if we were to take another balloon and wrap the first balloon over that basketball, the thickness of that balloon would be about the depth of the habitable atmosphere. So it's what we're looking at right there. And your 71% comment of covering is actually a very, very thin layer. that we have to be very careful with. You also mentioned the amount of water in the oceans and covering the planet. Take note of all the white swirls. There is a lot of water that's entrained in the atmosphere at any given moment. And that amount of water in the atmosphere is increasing, and that's going to come up in our conversation as we move forward.
So while all water is one, just to kind of level set, a few definitions might be helpful because we like to parse things out when we talk about engineering. So DJ, why don't you go first? Storm water, groundwater.
Okay, all water being one, it's a hydrological cycle. There are many pieces to this cycle. We have we mentioned the liquid water on Earth. That cycle evaporates and evaporates in the atmosphere. That rains back down on us as rain. It soaks into the ground. It's then pulled by different means back out of the ground and transpired back into the atmosphere in one way. In some ways, it also flows back into the ocean through a network of streams and rivers. So the hydrological cycle is never ending, and as Karen mentioned, the molecules of water just keep going in circles on the same molecules. So we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. It is all one, and we have to keep in mind how we treat it as one, as our species has intervened so greatly into this cycle.
So groundwater is more like naturally, well, all the water is naturally occurring, so that's not the right phrase, but groundwater is where water goes in the cracks and spaces on that are and goes back into its bioregion. Stormwater is water that rushes over the tops of surfaces. Often it could have been degraded from overgrazing. It could have been degraded, or it could be road surfaces. It could be off of the tops of buildings. So stormwater is something that we've sort of interacted with because of the impervious surfaces that are created. And then there's potable water or drinking water. Black water, it's what we flush down the toilet. Gray water comes from sinks, showers, and laundry. Particularly here in California, kitchen sink is also considered black water, not in every other state or every other jurisdiction. And then Kieran already introed this with green infrastructure and places where things open up to allow water back into the ground. And it actually can be infrastructure for many things besides water. But a nice, since we're talking about water, a nice distinction between green and gray. If you think of a way to combat sea level rise, you could put in a concrete seawall, or you could open it up and put in wetlands. Gray infrastructure would be the seawall. Green infrastructure would be opening it up and putting in wetlands. So oftentimes there's nature-based solutions that will do the same things, and we'll actually see the power and that are actually easier to maintain oftentimes as well. So we're gonna kind of go into gray and green a little bit more as we go on. So thanks, Karen. So I mentioned taking water out of one bioregion and using it in another. We're in a really large sense of this part of California in what's called the Bay Delta bioregion. Lots of people call it lots of different things. If you talk to people up in the Delta and you said that we were on the same river system in the San Francisco Bay, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But from the north, we have the Sacramento River. From the south, we have the San Joaquin River, and that feeds the Tuolumne. And in red circles, it's the Tuolumne where the Hetch Hetchy Dam is, and then a complex series of pipes that get it over into San Francisco. The reason it's a bioregion is because it's sort of they're interrelated in how it works. And the species that live here and how the river systems work and convene. DJ, you once told the back in history story at a recent advocacy meeting about how sort of the mountains and the ocean came up. Do you?
That's getting into the weeds, but well.
Okay, all right. If you want to move on.
15, 20,000 years ago, the coastline that we know it now is out beyond the Farallon Islands, about 20 miles off the San Francisco Peninsula. we call that region the coastal shelf. And the river system that we're looking now on this image, that existed at that time. And that water would flow through the Golden Gate as a river. The Golden Gate was basically a river that continued out towards the Farallones before it finally met the oceans. At that time, San Francisco was basically just rock, full of basins. As the sea levels rose, we all know why they did back then. It was because the ice caps started to melt. Sea levels rose, and we have this cycle of sediment that's coming out of the Sierra Nevada, and it's flushing out the Golden Gate. It's deposited just outside the Golden Gate. There are seasonal currents and combination with our wind patterns below that sediments, and the sediments are primarily sands. And as that happened over the thousands of years, those basins of stone, and which was San Francisco, filled with sand. Then we live on top of that sand now, and when it rains, the water that lands on those sandy soils percolates through. It's captured by the stone basins below, and those are our aquifers.
Yeah, and that actually becomes really important when you think about different responsibilities towards water in the city. When you're up in the taller regions, you're on the bits of rocks that were sitting out, and we're down in the lower regions, you're in areas where water can infiltrate. And there might be different techniques that we can get into to like slow the flow from the top to the bottom so that the city is working together as a whole. All right, next. So let's start with the Sierra snowpack. So we're talking about where our drinking water comes from, and this is, up in Tahoe, and it starts with the Sierra snowpack, and then it goes right next to the Tuolumne River, which is our next slide.
And we'll make note that was the Truckee Airport, and those particular mountains feed the Truckee River, which flow into Nevada. But the mountains are just the same, and it's the same snow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a picture that I had that wasn't pixelated. And then we get to the Tuolumne River. And the Tuolumne River is in a really beautiful river system, wild river system. The salmon are being pretty impacted by the amount of water and the amount of water use we have down here. And if we go to the next slide, we get to Hetch Hetchy, which, I totally get it. It's like we have great drinking water here. We stopped the Tuolumne River and we made a reservoir, which is what you see on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, as you can see, the Hetch Hetchy Valley before the reservoir was made. And it was really a valley that was similar, like of equal grandeur to Yosemite. And there were plans to dam the Hetch Hetchy and put a reservoir there, and everyone said, absolutely not. We're not going to do this. And then the 1906 earthquake happened, and San Francisco ran out of water, and suddenly the political will was there to make the Hetch Hetchy happen. So we really actually got something pretty massive done to put drinking water in.
Let's not forget, there's excellent synopsis on that history, Karen, but let's not also forget we're being hosted by the Sierra Club today.
Yeah.
The Sierra Club, tooth and nail, opposed the building of the Shaughnessy Dam, flooding of the Hetch Hetchy Valley, and led by John Muir. And we have to just keep that in mind. We're going to be talking about San Francisco water, and here it is. The Sierra Club is a lot of invested time and resource into Hetch Hetchy.
And we get to this slide, this is why. Hetch Hetchy is like a quintessential example of gray infrastructure. This is a more historic image of the O'Shaughnessy Dam there. It's actually since gotten higher. And then this is a sense of the tunnels and tubes and pipes that go for hundreds of miles from that dam down to San Francisco and other areas in the Bay Area.
I love the scale of the tunnel of the fellow walking through. the piping network and the size of the pipes that deliver this water, that draw water out of the Tuolumne and redirect it. The pipes are just massive, and you think about that relative to the river a few slides back, just to keep that perspective there.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So we get to San Francisco. It's a nice time to pause and say that we're on Ramaytush Ohlone land, and they were the first stewards. Actually, I didn't rehearse my land acknowledgement, but let's just say we're on Watersheds land. And this is an etching of what it might have been like pre-industrialization. This is actually down in the Mission District, where you were able to kind of there were seasonal villages that would move around with the wetlands and the watershed. And, I don't know if this is true, but I like to joke that river there you're seeing is pretty much Folsom Street, because that pretty much is what happens to Folsom Street when it rains again, So that area was all wetlands, and water was much more integrated within the city. So I think on the next map, we can kind of see that more.
Do you mind me just throwing a piece in there?
Yeah.
Sharon, do you mind going backwards just one? Thank you very much. This is an artistic rendering of what is. We pretty much know that the general geography and landscape looked like back then through written and recorded history. And not only is it the shoreline that we're looking at there, but to take a peek beyond the village and see the waterways that are meandering through the flatland before it turns into an alluvial plain beyond. And those waterways which drain the higher land in this image, it's not just necessarily what we would think would happen in San Francisco, but we think all around the San Francisco Bay and up into the Delta, in that those waterways behind have been channelized, in many cases lowered by many, many feet, which then, of course, they're unable to flood. And then when they do flood, we call it a disaster. But that flooding was necessary as part of the cycle of the land. Just wanted to throw that out there because I love that image.
It's funny. Last night I got a chance to hear Laurie Olin speak, who's a renowned urban planner and landscape architect, and he's like, there are no such thing as natural disasters. There's events, there's storm events, but the disaster is the human made. The disaster, like the people washing away or the buildings falling down, that's
you are the disaster.
The disaster part is human made, but storm events are just events.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic slide, because if we think about this and keep in mind the slide that we were just looking at, the blue zones here are historic wetlands on the San Francisco Peninsula. The magenta zones are basically landfills, and so we can both see at the same time the kind of the margin areas of what was between bay and land, and then at the same time we can see how human intervention has filled the wetlands and then also encroached well out into the bay. This is an early map of that. In fact, there was more encroachment. I think more encroachment.
Even more.
So.
I think the white box there says map in progress, because they're trying to change and update it to what we've actually encroached to. And then you also see the dark blue, which is Lake Merced.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, Karen. All right, we're going to do our next little survey here. So we'll do it. So do an emoji if you're from the North Bay. Okay. South Bay. Great. East Bay. Okay. One. Good. San Francisco. And now we're going to dial in. Okay. All right, San Franciscans. This one's really about you. Who's blowing up? Let's look at what neighbors you're in and track it to what watershed you're in. So If you're from the Presidio, go ahead. Yeah, you're like over in El Polan, and depending on where you're in, you may be in Lobos Creek. What about North Beach, Marina, Cow Hollow, Pack Heights, Nob Hill? Anyone over there? All right, well, it was North Beach. That was an easier one. Mission Creek. Now that one's going to spread. Like we think of San Francisco kind of like with Market Street, but you've got Yerba Buena south of Market. Some parts of the Mission are, if you're from any of those, Hayes Valley, Western Addition, not some parts of like Eureka Valley, Corona Heights, some of Noe, not all of it, kind of moves between Islay and Mission Creek. So you may be in Mission Creek. Islay Creek's another really big one. So we've got Potrero, Hunters Point, Bernal, Glen Park, Noe, Ural, and then actually going down into the outer Mission Terrace. And if you're down there, you may be crossing over so that's all Islay Creek. If you're down there from Visitation Valley, Yosemite, Bayview, Hunters Point, you're crossing into Visitation and Yosemite Creek, smaller ones over there that overlap. Let's go on the west side. Lake Merced's a big one. If you're by Lakeshore, Stonestown, Merced Heights, is Ingleside? Is that still? No, is that going over into Islay by Ingleside? I think it's probably Islay.
On the
yeah, yeah. And then Outer Richmond. If you're on the Richmond side, you're getting into Dunefield. And now we separate it by Golden Gate Park, but the Watershed actually doesn't have that separation, just we do. So, all right, next one.
All right, well, this is a great slide. It talks about those regions that Karen was just describing, and we see how those watersheds are translated into aquifers in the upper left-hand area. There you see the 7 aquifers of the San Francisco Peninsula: the Lobos Basin, the Marina Basin, Downtown Basin, Islay Valley Basin, South San Francisco Basin, and the Visitation Valley Basin. The last term. And what's important in our discussion, the West Side Basin Aquifer. Now take a look at the West Side Basin Aquifer and its scale, and think of your trips, hopefully you've made them, to Lake Tahoe. And we've scaled a image and transposed the West Side Basin Aquifer on top of Lake Tahoe, and you can see it stretches near the entire length of Lake Tahoe and probably about 20–25% of the width. On the west side, the image is up in your right-hand corner of this particular slide. We see development starting in the Dunefield area. The lower right-hand of this slide shows the current status of the Dunefields. Their Dunefields are gone. They're covered by buildings, streets, and sidewalks with what San Francisco cherishes and loves to call the inner block green space, the only space that's left permeable to rainfall on what was historic sand dunes. And you think about sand, sand is very permeable and water does not tend to run off at all. So the rain that fell on the west side of San Francisco, large percentage of it would soak into the ground and add to the aquifer. The lower left-hand corner shows a little more detailed. We'd have to zoom way in, but what we're looking at there is basically the system. Thank you, Kira. We're looking at the Hetch Hetchy Tuolumne River water distribution system. On the upper right-hand side of this, we see the Hetch Hetchy Valley, and we see the 3 reservoirs, the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, Lake Eleanor, and Lake Lloyd Reservoir, that all historically feed the Tuolumne River, but they are currently dam owned by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. Further downstream, we have the new Don Pedro Reservoir, and then smaller reservoirs as we go along. I bet from the Don Pedro, you'll see that the river's historic course continues, but then there's diversion. And so the green, what you're seeing there are the pipelines. So this is where we're actually taking the water all up the pipeline.
And the Don Pedro mostly serves agriculture, and it's giant. It is a big river system, a big reservoir. Yeah.
And we could have a whole separate
discussion about that.
It's also a water bank for San Francisco. If you can see, a lot of complexity there.
Yep.
In trying to make this simple, what we're looking at, all these areas that are named and pinpointed on this particular map, really, if you were to go to any single one of them, they're huge industrial looking complex of pump stations and like they look like gigantic factories, all for the purpose of distributing San Francisco's water. And when we talk about San Francisco's water, we can see that it's not just San Francisco, but it's just the entire yellow area.
Yeah.
River is feeding. So we should pop on over to the next slide. Love this slide. Zooming in on the last remaining stretch of dunes. The last remaining stretch of dunes. We had vast, thousands of acres of dunes on the west side of San Francisco. What we have now, just west of the Great Highway, which is now as our lovely Sunset Dunes Park. It's about 100-yard stretch of primary dune before we hit the beach and the Pacific Ocean. And it's great image here because we are looking at, let me see the streets. Yes, we're looking at the Dutch windmill, which is within northern of the two windmills. So there's the Dutch windmill, which was built in 1903, I believe. And then there's the Murphy windmill, I believe, 1908. Somebody can check me on that. But this is good because these windmills were built to draw water from the aquifer to water Golden Gate Park and to add water to the water features within Golden Gate Park. There are now over 50 production wells drawing from the West Side Basin aquifer. So.
Okay, next.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a big one. I'm gonna zoom out and then DJ's gonna zoom in.
Yes.
So we talked about stormwater at the beginning. Stormwater is what happens to water as it hits the ground and is not able to percolate or go back into the rivers, stream, groundwater systems. And so stormwater is what washes over your street, what comes off the roofs, San Francisco is an older city, and back when infrastructure was being made, the stormwater and the sewage water got put into the same set of pipes. That is not very common. You can kind of imagine what happens when there's a large rain event, that they are put together, and it can't. Once they're together, we get some pretty nasty things. So why don't you keep going from there, DJ?
Okay. I love this image. I've seen it so many times. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission uses this image, and it's a very rosy looking scenario of what actually happens. You see, people walking hand in hand on the sidewalk, a youngster with hopefully a parent, and then we see a cutaway section of a building, and we see what probably looks like a kitchen sink. And if they stretch that cutaway a little further over, you'd see the bathroom and the toilet, and that water. This is an important aspect of this conversation. That water coming out of the building, which is the black water that Karen described earlier in our conversation, is combined with the roof water, which you see as a vertical line on that building. And you note that they're both blue in this case, but where the water and the pipes below the person that's standing in the building, that would be the black water, and the stormwater coming off the roof. You see they're combining right at the edge of the building, and that's exactly what happens. And that's combined. It basically is taking the absolutely fresh rainwater, which is the same water that comes out of the sky, that if it doesn't rain on San Francisco, that water vapor continues on up to the Sierra Nevada and falls as rain or snow up there. And then we bring it all the way back to San Francisco. In the meanwhile, that rain, while it fell in San Francisco, it was mixed with sewage and immediately polluted. The other thing that I really love about this picture, I don't know so much love it, but I always smirk. You see the large transfer box, you see the large box, which is an underground causeway. PC calls them transfer boxes, that collects both the stormwater and the sewage water. And when those boxes fill up in large rain events, it's a combination of sewage, which is raw sewage. And then you see that it's piped, and it looks like it's piped underneath the beach and over to some water over on the right-hand side. Well, this is just a very diagrammatic way of saying that our sewage goes into the bay and in the ocean. And we're going to see that, I think, in some future slides here.
So it's also untangling this system will be expensive, right? Putting the system in and maintaining it is also expensive. And as we continue to have greater and greater storm events, it's important for us to be fully aware of what the system is, how other cities have unmingled that, and maybe start to look at other ways to make that happen. So if we get to the next slide, you'll see a large rain event under division. And, I actually was literally driving in that because I was an idiot. So that's my picture, and it was one of the early atmospheric rivers. It was a couple of years ago now, like before they had started to really it was one of the first ones before we really knew what they were. So that's an image there. And then what happens, and as they're happening now more frequently, now I know to stay off the road when I hear those warnings, as it happens and they're happening more frequently, these are gates that open up, and it doesn't look dirty, but it is dirty. It's the sewage and the water mixed together. San Francisco does do an admirable job of getting out the flotsam and all of the floating things with their gates, but it doesn't stop the nutrients that are they're great on land, but they're not great in water. They can cause algae blooms. They can, harm sea life, etc. So, and then
call it what it is. It's just suspended poop.
Yeah, exactly. Suspended solids.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah. And so the next slide can kind of go into a little bit more detail on this.
Well, the last slide those were the east side of San Francisco. We saw the flood underneath Division, and we saw one of the overflow gates that releases raw sewage into the bay. These two images are untreated raw sewage going onto Ocean Beach on the west side. And you can see the amount of water. You can see the erosion to the beach. It takes away a lot of sand every time this happens. And then it leaves that water in these huge lakes right on the beach. And the beach, San Francisco's beach, is national seashore. And now, as of just last spring, a city park, at Sunset Dunes Park. So everybody should be aware that this is what we are dumping on the beach. It's not like that diagrammatic image we were looking at a few slides ago with a little pipe that's running underneath the sand and going out into the ocean. What we actually experience in real life is exposed raw sewage. After the rain stops, the very next days, we'll see maybe just only a trickle coming out of these discharge boxes, but the lakes on the beach are still there, and the kids are playing in it. It's nice warm water relative to the ocean. And people are throwing sticks for their dogs, and the fecal bacteria count is up into the tens of thousands, 20,000s milligrams per liter, whereas the EPA standard for human contact would be below 200 milligrams per liter. So it's highly, highly, highly polluted water.
So if you're in San Francisco and you're tempted to go wading through and playing in that water, now you know what it is. Yeah. All right. So we'll go on to some things we'll start talking about with some things that you can start doing.
Yeah, that's great. That's a perfect segue. This slide starts to break down where that water comes from. Let's start with the pie graph there in the center. We see that the dark gray are rooftops, the light gray streets and sidewalks, the green inner block open space that I had described earlier, and then the very little sliver is miscellaneous, schools and parks, etc., which make up a very small amount of the surface area of our urbanized landscape. The image on the right, you can start to just blur your eyes, and you can see that the rooftops and the streets are about if you were to draw a line down the center. So in fact, exactly how we did this, we use CAD programs, and we drew lines down the center of the streets, and then we outlined the rooftop, the buildings, to create a donut. Then we let the CAD program tell us the square footage of that donut, and we added that and compared it against the square footage of an outer donut, which was from the street-facing sides of the buildings out to the center of the streets. And that's how we came up with this roughly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of land area coverage. We did 10 blocks to sampling, and it's not perfect, but it's close enough. We can see on the image on the left, we see this West Side Basin Aquifer that we looked at covering Lake Tahoe a few slides back. We see the yellow area surrounding the aquifer, and Karen asked early on, and we had a lot of "we don't know" emojis. The West Side Basin Aquifer is pumped not only by San Francisco, but by municipalities south of San Francisco: San Bruno, Colma, Daly City, South San Francisco, others, unincorporated areas of San Mateo County as well. And that entire yellow area is the area that of pumped aquifer water used for domestic purposes, domestic and irrigation purposes on the peninsula.
And one interesting thing is that this aquifer is relatively clean. Like the other aquifers in San Francisco have been contaminated and they're no longer suitable to be used for drinking water, whereas this West Side Aquifer is actually a really amazing resource that we have local watershed water in our region.
Yeah, that's a great point to make, and I one can just visualize it just from our experience of driving back and forth across the city. Water that flows down to the east side of the city, and the east side is where San Francisco and our other municipalities and jurisdictions have industrialized, where the west side watershed, it's primarily residential and open space, as you can see on the map. So really good point, Karen.
And if you're interested in hearing how the east side got contaminated, reach out to Kieran. He's got a really great history project over there about the railroads and tanneries and, Mission Creek. So, all right, next one. Lake Merced. So Lake Merced, DJ, I'm gonna start this and you're gonna fill in here, because Lake Merced is sort of like the top of the West Side Aquifer, but there's a bit of a shelf in between, so they're not really intermixing, but it's actually pressurizing and keeping the West Side Aquifer from getting filled with ocean water. So it's actually somewhat of a protective layer. Roughly, very simplified, that it's a visible portion of the West Side Aquifer, which I have learned this from DJ. So now he can
I have to be careful, because I saw one of the names pop up. We have a hydrologist from.
Yeah. So now you can be more precise. This is like in a big, yeah. But it's a natural lake. It's a natural lake in San Francisco. It's not man-made. It's
hydrologist from the Berkeley Lawrence National.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe in the Q&A they can really.
I'll do my best.
In the Q&A they can really lean in on this. Okay, so we go to the next one.
It is hydrologically connected to the West Side Basin Aquifer. The lake bed is slightly below sea level, and the lake itself is above sea level due to pressure from the aquifer. So as water soaks in from higher elevations and fills the aquifer, being that Lake Merced is the low area of land, it's very similar to where if you were on the beach and you were just to scrape away some wet sand near the water line, and you would basically, you'd see a little puddle of water where your hand just scraped that sand away. That is basically the equivalent of Lake Merced. And yes, we would love to think that Lake Merced is constantly by pressure being filled by the aquifer, which it did historically, and would flow to the ocean, and would be as much as 25 feet above sea level, and even higher at times. But we have taken so much money. It is money. We have drawn so much water from the aquifer, and we have restricted the recharging of the aquifer to such an extent, and that the aquifer pressure is so low that monitoring wells have detected water flowing basically in reverse of what had flown historically. So we're picking up surface waters from the lake. They're showing up in some of the monitoring wells around the lake, which we don't want to see.
Yeah. So it's in all of our interest to allow groundwater recharge to refill Lake Merced to keep the aquifer healthy.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Next one. So how can we protect our watershed? So pervious surfaces that allow water through and can percolate and become groundwater, because groundwater is good. We want that to happen. Stormwater is a problem. The other thing is that we talked about the mid-block open space. Just so you know, there's no current code that says you can't put a thin layer of concrete over your entire backyard. If it's less than 30 inches high, you're allowed to concrete the whole thing. There are ordinances right now in San Francisco about the front yard, but we really need to think about and protect the rear yards as well, to allow pervious surfaces to recharge groundwater. Another thing in DJ's description of the rocks and the basins, if you're up the hill in Twin Peaks, your job may be to slow the flow of water as it goes downhill. And if you're in the west side and you're on sand, your job may be to let it percolate, where you live. So there's different methods that might be used from depending on where you live. It's like not always for instance, if you were in the lower Mission area, the idea of ground percolation, you might be too soaked, and so you might need a rain storage tank that then you could more slowly release it.
The theories are all the same. We follow principles. The tactic changes specific to location, right?
Yeah. And there's other things you can do about protecting the watershed. So all of us kind of maybe like to wear fabrics that are like give a little bit and have some synthetic fibers in it. Well, you can, for about $99 on your washer and dryer machine, put in a little microplastic filter. So you can stop microplastics from getting into the waterway. You could use clay or mineral-based paints. Paints are the #1 way that microplastics get into the ocean. So that's crazy to think of. Happens. And then there's roofing materials that you can look at that you also stop the stormwater by getting filled with like petrochemicals as it comes down the drains, or even green roofs to hold it on. You can install gray water systems, and there's gray water systems for whole house. If you live in San Francisco right now, it's just the whole house ones that you can get permanent, but they're working with manufacturers to change the code for the point of use showers, so there's other systems that you can use in other jurisdictions, but right now the point of use and laundry ones, there's some slight code changes still happening. But gray water means once you have the water, we don't just flush the Tuolumne River down the toilet, but we drink it. Well, it's going to go down the toilet if we drink it. We use it in our bathroom sink, in our shower, and we use it as many times as possible to flush the toilet, to irrigate the lawn, and to, like, actually value it before it goes into the sewer system.
Don't tell the authorities on me, Karen, but
they might be on the call, GJ. So no.
We disconnected our kitchen sink and it waters an apple tree in our backyard.
Yeah.
It's the water. The apples are delicious.
And so this is a project on Ocean Beach, and it's just an example of some water saving features in action. So there's a green roof here. There are sunset pavers. And then through the yard, all of, even where the pavers are happening, like, don't put them in concrete, like, try and put things in, if you can, sand set them, or put them in things that allow water to percolate through, even if you're making your deck. Like, if you're doing a wood deck, don't then put an entire concrete slab under it. Just put this, like, where you need it, up the post. So think of that. Think of the plants that are plants that can take the water and hold it. And so there's lots of, think of your exterior surfaces in the building that don't kind of wash away plastics into the environment. And so with that, let's go to questions and answers. We have about 10 minutes left. If people have any questions.
Using the bottom of the toolbar beneath the visuals, you see there's a raise hand button. If you raise your hand, then we can promote you to be able to speak and ask your question. So we're going to start with Mr. Howard Strassner. So Howard, I sent you the permission. You may need to accept it and activate your microphone or camera, up to you. And then once you do that, we should be able to see you and you can ask your question. So we'll give you a minute. And then in the meantime, others are welcome to put up your hand, ask questions you have for our guests, and then you'll be entered in the queue. Howard, okay, we can see your letter H. If you could unmute your microphone, then we should be able to hear you. You able to get to the unmute button? Let's see, there's also someone with the name Parks RHN. I'm also adding you as someone who can participate if you'd like to ask your question.
It's like they have a microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Is the host allowing? Oh, I see.
Okay, did that work?
It
That
works.
works. We hear you.
Yes.
Hi, it's Susan Karasoff.
Hey,
I
Susan.
run the Parks group for Russian Hill Neighbors,
Oh, nice.
and also with the California Native Plant Society. So just so you guys know, no one can use the chat unless we're all promoted to something. So California Native Plant Society would like everyone to plant native plants, please. And we do have a list of native plants. So there's 500 native plants still remaining in San Francisco. There were just over 700. And we've got a bunch that can actually take that extra water when you add a bioswales, or you add something that will slow that water. And so I just added something to the chat with the list of that bioswales option. So
Excellent. And we can share this link also afterwards with participants.
that would be great. Thank you so much for what you guys are doing and helping us understand the watersheds better. I do want to hear all about that aquifer contamination, and if there is anything we can do to start fixing that or addressing it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I'll go back on mute.
Cool.
DJ, do you want to mention anything on that?
Well,
On the question about aquifer contamination and like where we're at?
I don't, the six, well, there's the West Side Basin Aquifer is the seventh on our list, and it's the largest by far of the peninsula aquifers. The other six are, first of all, there's not nearly as much water in them. But they were used historically, gold rush on to 1900s, those watersheds and the springs that those aquifers and the springs that flow from them were used for domestic purposes. But because of urbanization, those particular aquifers, I don't think there's a strong push by anybody to try and clean an aquifer, because it would take so long to flush everything through or somehow clean it. It's not easily done. The West Side Basin Aquifer, we do have to be careful with it. One of the things that we do at Westside Water Resources is when we redirect water from rooftops, we coat rooftops with a restoration product that's silicone based, and silicone is inert to UV degradation, whereas petroleum product
Asphalt shingles.
roofing products are notorious for UV degradation. In fact, it's kind of weird. It seems like the whole roofing industry wants to put a product up there that's going to degrade so that they can put a new roof up in 15 to 20 years. Whereas silicone base, there are cities in underdeveloped countries around the world that use these same products to catch rainwater to use for domestically. In our country, we have the National Sanitation Foundation. That's the NSF symbol that you might see on certain products, and the silicone coatings that we use on rooftops are NSF Protocol 151 certified as a potable water collection.
So if we zoomed out, especially if you're on the west side of the city, the ways that you could protect the Lake Merced, the aquifer under Lake Merced, is to think about, if you happen to own your building, and then you can think about what you put on it so it doesn't leach into the water as storm water, and then you can think about how you could put in bioswales, rain gardens, and systems to recharge the aquifer, because it'll percolate down through the sand. And then there's other advocacy work that we really would like to kind of think about how to draw less, like for irrigation, for other things that are happening on golf courses around, and how to open the lake up to the surrounding water so it's not a stagnant lake, but one that's it's called terminal, which I think is a really good euphemism for what happens when you keep a lake stagnant. And so how to make it a not terminal lake, how to make it a lake that floats. So there's some things that maybe are some big advocacy we can do on it.
We have time for another question or two. And again, you can just raise your hand by pressing that hand icon. In the meantime, I was curious to ask a question. What is kind of the latest on how much, if any, are we pulling from the aquifer for freshwater in San Francisco? And, what is the capacity of that if we were to recharge it? For example, would it be possible to no longer pull from Hetch Hetchy? How do we think about what the capacity is, and how does that relate to our use of water?
That's a fantastic question. Karen, do you mind if I run with this?
Yeah, no, this is all you.
So yes, we take so much river water, so much Tuolumne River water, that the salmon population in the Tuolumne has just been devastated. It's a small fraction of its historic pre-gold rush runs, like 1/5000th of the amount of fish swim up the Tuolumne River every year now, comparatively to the pre-gold rush amounts of salmon run. So we're talking, how many salmon are those? That's less than 1,000, whereas 250,000 would have been a historic run, annual run. So I wanted to throw that little that little tidbit in there because about 85% of the water that we drink in San Francisco and surrounding municipalities that San Francisco is contracted with to supply water to, about 85% of that water is the mountain water. That depending on where one lives, resides, the remaining 15% is going to be a combination of primarily watersheds from the East Bay, Alameda County, is the largest, I believe, and then a very small amount will be from the West Side Basin Aquifer. The West Side Basin Aquifer contribution, the reason it is so small is because the West Side Basin Aquifer is not in the best health that we'd like to see. We'd like to see that pressure increased. We'd like to see the pressure increase to the point where Lake Merced is gaining elevation, becoming deeper. There are times when we blend in maybe 1% of our total water, of aquifer water, into our total water. The San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, when they first started the blending discussion in the mid-aughts, had projected that we might blend as much as 20% of our mountain water with our aquifer water. But to date, I think, don't quote me on this because it's not scientifically statistical, but I think that the greatest amount of blends I've ever heard of on the wettest, after the wettest of years, has been maybe 2.5%, but it's less than 1%. Sometimes it's just none because there's just not enough water in the aquifer. The capacity of the aquifer, if we had a healthy, regenerative, charging our aquifer and drawing from it, it's a lot. It's like 60,000 acre feet a year that can be drawn from the aquifer and maintain a healthy aquifer. But we can't do that with all the impervious surfaces that we have. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah.
Does acre feet confuse people, or?
It confuses me. Like how much of that is the percentage of water we use? Like how does that compare? How many acre feet of water do you know that we use in San Francisco?
I'm all flustered up with numbers then.
Sorry, all right. We'll get to the next
We
question.
think of an acre foot. We think of an acre.
Yeah. So,
Just under 44,000 square feet, and 1 foot deep is 1 acre foot. So yeah, that puts it in perspective.
okay.
So we have another question. Go ahead.
Again, it's Susan. So the city of San Francisco uses very, very little pesticide, but all of the golf courses get a pass on that. And I haven't seen any of the numbers on that, and I don't know who reports water quality on Lake Merced, but my understanding is that we've got golf courses dumping their pesticides and other fertilizers and insecticides into Lake Merced. So would love to get more visibility on that.
Great.
And golf courses.
Us too, actually.
I'm a surfer, not a golfer, but
Yeah,
but that's correct. So
that's true.
nitrates are the limiting constituent component for water quality in Lake Merced, and what we really need to do is have one of these conversations that focuses just on Lake Merced, because it's very complex, but there is a lot of testing done, and there's a lot of accumulated knowledge now on why Lake Merced is the way it is, and how is that? It's state designated as not suitable for human contact. So don't want to drink it, don't want to swim in it.
And so it's not just the pesticides; it's also fertilizers. So it's that's the doing the so
it's actually primarily fertilizer. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question from Frank. Let's see if you're able to unmute. Okay, I just gave you access, so you should be able to activate
Okay.
your microphone. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Hey, thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. I have a little bit of a selfish question. Karen, the slide that you showed of the backyard with the landscaped, I think guess they were permeable pavers.
Mhm.
Can you share who did that design?
Yeah, it's Outerlands Design.
Okay.
They're a landscape firm, a design build landscape firm that actually really specializes on the west side. I think there's yeah, there's Outerlands. They're great.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that sharing that information, I mean, if anyone else,
Edgelands, sorry, actually, someone in my firm, Outerlands is somebody else. Sorry, it's Edgelands Design. Luckily, someone in my firm is on the call and was like, "You're plugging the wrong landscape architect right now. It's Edgeland Design."
okay, Edgeland Design.
Edgeland, yeah, yeah.
All right,
Paige
wonderful.
is her name, and she's great to work with.
Okay, great to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Kemi.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're already about 10 minutes over. So I wanted to thank Karen and Doug for all the preparation and time and effort you've put into this. And also all of the viewers. It's amazing how many people are sticking with us even this late into the conversation. I think it really indicates a lot of interest in these topics. And what I'll do to kind of close this out is actually make a suggestion that if you're interested in learning more, all you need to do is just go to greensfnow.org. And we have some upcoming events after this webinar. So in August, we have a couple events where we're actually going to meet in person and go look at these watersheds. And so we have some experts that are going to help us do what we're calling sewer tours of these watersheds. The first of which is early August. We'll be in the Mission District, then we'll have an Ocean Beach tour later in August, and then come back to Mission Creek in September, and then check out the Yosemite Slough and Islay Creek watershed in October. So this is another really awesome way to physically experience the actual land and see these elements for yourself. So I highly encourage folks to come and join us in person as the summer and fall continues. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll make the recording available, and we'll see you in person soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Bye, everyone.